All right, y'all ready for the geography final?
I said it all week.
I think I've said all I know about that subject, so does anybody have any questions before I move on to a new topic about the geography of the Middle East? I think it's important that we understand how we got where we are today. To do that, we have to go back to the beginning. It is amazing to me how the world has bought into evolution and the Big Bang Theory, because when you start looking at the evidence, you realize there's not any. Matter of fact, I have some quotations by some renowned evolutionists and scientists who admit, one of them was the head of the American Evolutionary Society. I mean, the head guy of the whole book. He actually said in public, he says, I know that there's not a lot of evidence for evolution, that there's all kinds of holes in the theory, that there's a lot of questions we can't answer, but we must accept it. Because the other alternative is unthinkable. In other words, I refuse to believe in God, so therefore I have to buy evolution, even though it's all wet. Not long ago, a major professor, an evolutionary professor at one of the major universities, got up at the National Evolutionary Society's meeting, and he started off by saying, can anybody in this room mention one thing that we know for certain about evolution? He said, not a soul could come up with a single. There is no evidence. There is nothing you can look at and say, this proves evolution to be true. So we're going back to the beginning. In the beginning, God. Now, those folks who deny God say, well, all this that exists had to come from somewhere, and they believe in the Big Bang, that at one point all the matter in the universe was in one small ball and it exploded and scattered throughout the universe, and all the stars and planets and everything came off of that. Now, if you believe that, I got some swampland, I'll say it. Can anybody see a problem with that theory just by itself?
Something still had to cause
What
the
caused the
beginning.
explosion?
Yeah, so
What'd you say?
The beginning, yeah. What?
Well, what caused the explosion? Well, you can explain that by physics, because all that matter...
But what created the beginning? I mean, there has to
Well,
be a
that's my
beginning.
question. Where did that matter come from? You know, they say, well, where did God come from? Well, God is eternally existing. It's easier for me to believe in God than it is that this matter suddenly just appeared out of nothing. Where did that matter come from that everything now is made out of? Where did it come from? I mean, I can understand that if the matter was there and it exploded, how we might get to where we are. Yes.
that is a very interesting concept, because we never look at the idea that God was in heaven before He created the world.
Yes.
So He was always in heaven, and heaven is still the same as it was then.
Yes.
It's this
Yes.
physical
Yes.
realm that's changing.
What does the name, God's name,
Yeah.
is not God. God is what He is, but His actual name in Hebrew is YHWH. Original Hebrew had no vowels. And so it was a 4-letter tetragrammaton. Fancy way of saying YHWH. We have loosely translated that as Yahweh. Eventually the King James Version translated it as Jehovah. What they did is they took 2 or 3 words and put them together. They took the word for Yahweh and they took the word for Lord and combined them and made the word Jehovah. Next time you study with a Jehovah's Witness, if one ever comes to your house, I did this and blew one of them to mine. She said, you want to study the Bible? I said, I would love to study the Bible. So we went and sat down at the table and I got my Bible out. And I said, okay, now you demand salvation in the name of Jehovah, right? She says, yes. I said, only the name of Jehovah can save a person. Yes. I said, well, isn't it true that word doesn't even appear in the original text? That that's a made-up English word? And boy, she got furious. She said, look, I came here to teach you. You're not teaching me anything. I said, okay, with that kind of attitude, I'm not surprised. I have other quotations by renowned evolutionists. I mean, men who teach their whole lives evolution. And they'll say, well, when scientists come up with something they can't answer, they just make something up. He admits it. They can't just say, we don't know. Yes.
Well, we all know there's a logical fallacy here, the Big Bang Theory, because everybody knows explosions don't create life, they end life.
Explosion,
We've never
destroy
gone to a
it.
bomb site to go look for a new life.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't go to Hiroshima and after the bomb went off and say, now where's all this new life that's springing up? Yeah.
Well, it looks like after thousands and thousands of years, something else would have.
Oh, no, you're not allowing the billions and trillions of years you got. That's the whole key to evolution, is you got to allow enough time. Their theory is if you allow enough time, anything's possible. If you say, well, this took 1 billion years or 1 million years or 50, I noticed just this last week there's several articles online about, well, the universe is twice as old as we thought it was. Instead of 50 billion, it's 100.
How do they know?
That's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. They can't. They're just making it up.
They were there.
I guess so. Matter of fact, in the last few years, several physicists have come out and said, we did the math, and the Big Bang doesn't work. The math does not fit the Big Bang Theory. And so there's been several physicists, renowned physicists, who come out and say, well, we don't really have any mathematical evidence for the Big Bang. And so they're trying to come up with a new explanation for the Big Bang. It's incredible what they're doing. No other field of science would accept that nonsense. If you did that in any other area, they would laugh you off the stage. They would say this is the worst science in the history of the world. But they get away with it in evolution. Why? For one reason. They don't believe God. That's exactly
It's the
right.
same thing we have today with what man can be a woman now.
Yeah, exactly.
They're accepting that because of
Yeah,
political
because-
pressure.
Right, right. Yeah, if you tried pulling that 100 years ago, people would have laughed at you. They put you in the same asylum, yeah. Well, you can't tell if a woman's a woman. Sure you can. They yell differently than men do. They're smarter mouth than men are. Or smarter, one or the other. Yeah, I sent April a text today, and she sent a smart mouth answer back. I won't get into it.
You don't believe that.
Yes.
It was like Red Skelton said one time. He hadn't talked to his wife in years because he didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah. Right. At any rate, the evidence for evolution just isn't there. They admit, I've got several quotes from well-known evolutionists who will say, well, we don't really have any proof of this. This is just, we make this, every bit of evolution. When I began to study the subject, when I was 19, in graduating high school, I was in science and math. I thought I was going to be a big engineer, and I began to question my faith. I had been to church my whole life, and I began to say, well, are all these smart people wrong? And and I really began to question my faith. I want to study it. So I did some intensive study, mathematics, physics, linguistics, history, because I was seriously concerned about this. My soul was, and the more I studied, the madder I got, because I realized every single bit of evolution is based on a supposition. They assume things. They have no proof or any of it. Even all the radiometric dating, well, this rock dated 14 million years. That's a bunch of hogwash. I studied that. There are institutes around the country where you can take a rock and you can have them test it and tell you how old it is. And what I found out what they did is they'll take your rock and they'll subject it to their radiometric testing, and if it falls outside their expected range, they just throw it out and say, well, that can't be right. Unless it comes within their expected range, then they'll accept it. And if you take that same rock to every different testing spot in the country, you might get anywhere from that rock is 1 million years old to 2 billion.
Right, aren't they assuming as well that there's a certain amount, I don't know if it's the carbon or the radiation or whatever, but they're assuming there's a set
Yes.
amount in the
Yes.
beginning that they
Yes.
don't, that you cannot
Yeah.
verify.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
called
something-
parent. Yeah, your parent
Yeah.
amount and then your daughter amount. And they're assuming that if you start off with this much parent amount, which they don't know, they're guessing, and you have this much daughter, then it's got to be this many million years old. But they're guessing. They don't know how much started in that. Again, it's all based on assumptions. So it's much easier for me, after looking at the evidence, to believe God did this. God spoke and the universe existed. And look at all the laws in the universe. Millions of laws of science and math and everything works. Who put all that together? That just happened? That's crazy.
Points to a mind.
Oh. And the idea that, if evolutionists say that if you go low enough in the Earth's mantle, you've got all these layers. The layers are, this layer is 4 million years, this is 12 million, so forth. If you go down far enough, you come to a layer where there was no life. It's called the Precambrian layer. And they all agree that in the Precambrian layer, there was no life. There are no fossils. There were no fossils of the dead animals. Now, if evolution were correct, what would you find in the first layer above the Precambrian? You'd find very simple, the most simple, basic life forms in that first layer above the Precambrian. That's what you would have to find. And then as you go up the layers, what would you find?
More advanced.
More advanced, more complicated, until you get to the top layer, you'd have the most. That's what you would have to find if evolution were anywhere near correct. But I've got quotations by evolutionists that say, we were shocked when we found in that first layer complex life forms. I'm not.
So on that, can you clarify like the difference a little bit between macro and micro, like the difference between finches, birds' beaks, how they change a little bit in seasons,
There's a difference in evolution and adaptation.
Yeah.
Adaptation. Human life, or all life, adapts. That's true.
Because a lot of people argue that. Is
Yeah. If you take fish from a river or an ocean or a lake with normal eyesight, and you put them in a cave where it's completely dark, over several decades, they have fish after fish, new fish are born. What happens eventually? They become blind. Why?
They don't need eyes.
Because they don't need eyes and they adapt. If you take one of us who grew up in the South and put us in Alaska, we would adapt. I freezed to death for a while, but eventually I would learn to, I had a student at Oklahoma Christian from Alaska.
Not eventually, quickly.
Quickly, yeah. But I had students from Alaska to come to Oklahoma Christian, all of us Southerners, and we were used to warm weather. Well, they were used to cold weather. And so they had to learn to adapt. That they wore short sleeves while the rest of us were wearing overcoats, Well, life adapts. That's the way God made it. If you take one life form and put it somewhere different, it's going to adapt. And that's what you're talking about. The bird beaks,
Yeah, like
they adapted. All animals adapt to their surroundings. If you put people in an environment where they have only meat to eat, and then you move them to a plant-based diet, they'll have to adapt, But that's got nothing to do with evolution. But all the evidence, all of it, shows God made. Matter of fact, they say that, I've even got a quote by a prominent evolutionist who says, actually, the evidence is more of a creation model. He says, and we still can't explain this as evolutionists, why is there sudden explosion of life? In the Precambrian level, there's no life, and then suddenly the next layer is full of life. How would you explain that?
So would that be like, okay, we don't see any, half gorilla people around, or we don't
Yes.
see any, cat dogs walking around?
Yes.
Dinosaurs turning in.
Yes.
Dino chickens.
Yeah. Well, see, the way the evolutionist says, well, after billions of years, they all disappeared.
Yeah, that's what I've read too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why are there still
We
monkeys
need more
if
time,
we
we need more
developed, if
time.
we've developed from monkeys? Why we still have monkeys?
Oh, well, you're just deliberately ignoring the truth.
Well, like you said, it should be in those layers, there should be evidence.
Yes.
of it.
And I have another quote by a very prominent evolutionist teaching at a major university, and he says, by now, the fossil record is complete. He said, we have found hundreds of thousands of fossils of every known creature on the planet, and we have yet to find a single transitional animal. What's a transitional animal? Something between animals.
Yeah.
In other words, there's got to be something. If we came from monkeys, there's got to be something between us and monkeys. And he says we have not found a single creature between us and monkeys. Now, every once in a while, some evolutionist comes and says, oh, I found it. And then after a little research, they found, no, it wasn't, something else. But there's not a single evidence of any transitional forms. There's nothing between, they say that, this one still blows my mind. Do you know where whales came from?
Bears.
Bears! Evolutionists actually teach that whales evolved from bears. That one blows my mind.
Is
I
it-
could,
They're
They
both
got
big.
5 bones, finger bones in there.
Maybe so.
In their
maybe so. In their flippers?
Yeah.
I don't know. But to believe that whales came from bears?
Well, if we came from monkeys, why are they still here? Why
Well, that's
are
what
they
his question
still
was.
here?
Well, the evolutionists say, well, we came from a more primitive, monkeys are another branch of the family. Maybe his family, not mine.
What about the Cro-Magnon man?
Oh, the Cro-Magnon man. If you bury somebody's skull in the ground for 5,000 years, their skull's going to be a little distorted. And they'll find some skull that's been distorted. We don't know what disease he had. We don't. Some people have big heads. Some people have tiny heads. My best friend one time was in a science class, and the teacher walks in, and he puts out all these skulls, about 10 different skulls, and every one of them was a different size. He says, now what does that prove? And my friend says, that proves that you can put things in order of size.
You passed kindergarten.
If we took all of the heads in this room, we could line them up in order of size. Some people have big heads, some people have little heads. That doesn't prove anything. But the evolutionists, oh yeah, that means they've evolved. No, they haven't. It's crazy. So to me, it's easier to believe that God did all this. It has a purpose. It has a meaning. And the evidence is all circumstantial. There is no proof. It's all supposition.
And they do all this because they don't want to be accountable to God.
Exactly.
But they're still accountable to God.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like you're just fooling
Yeah.
yourself. Why
Yeah.
bother with it?
Yeah,
Why
that's
not
true.
just say,
But if I deny God, then I don't have to answer to God. Yes, ma'am.
What is the argument on the reverse? If you're sitting down with someone who believes in evolution, what is the reverse argument for God?
I'm not following you. What do you mean the reverse?
Tell them.
What would I tell them?
Yes.
I would just show them the quotes I have from all these evolutionists that deny evolution.
well, and I would say design demands the design.
Design demands a designer.
Creation is that's the evidence of the existence of God.
But to me, the most difficult question for the evolutionists to answer, where did the matter come from to start with? If the entire universe came from one big bang, where did that come from? It's got to come from something. It didn't just happen. And if nobody made it, it doesn't make any sense.
Creation
Yes, sir.
is the
Yeah,
evidence.
I'm from California, and we go up to the Sequoia National Park, and they say that the sequoias are the oldest living thing on Earth. That's what they kind of
Yeah.
say. I don't-
Yeah, yeah. There's another thing that's amazing to me. The evolutionists believe in these layers. Obviously the earth is laid down in layers. You can go to any deep canyon in the world and see all these layers. What's funny is that none of them are the same. If you go to the Grand Canyon, they have the layers marked. This is the Precambrian layer. This is the Cambrian layer. This is the
This is
Mesozoic layer, yeah. And this one's 42 million years. This one's 17 million, blah, 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 blah. What's funny is nowhere on the planet, look at the front of your kid's biology text, and they've got the layers. That doesn't exist anywhere in nature. That only exists in texts. They made it up. Matter of fact, if you go to the Grand Canyon, they've got layers on top of layers. They're supposedly 1 billion years older. How'd that happen? I mean, the layers are never in order. You can go to any major canyon in the world and look at the layers. None of them are in order as the way the theory says.
You know, one consideration with that is the eruption of Mount St. Helens. When Mount St. Helens erupted, it literally created a canyon
Yes!
of ash
Yes!
in a matter of hours.
Yes!
That was, I mean, we're talking
Yes!
maybe
Yes!
almost 100 feet tall. I don't know. I've seen
Yeah.
a picture of a little lady.
Matter of fact, they took rocks from the Mount St. Helens eruption. Brand new rocks. They were just formed out of magma. They took them to these places that date them. Some of them were dated at 50 million, some 100 million, some 10 billion. But we knew for a fact they were brand new rocks. And that's how crazy it is. So, to me, the evidence for God doing it is a whole lot stronger than for the Big Bang did it. So God's hands formed the universe.
For Hannah's argument, it's really hard to argue.
It's hard to argue with the person that doesn't want to believe.
They
Yeah.
don't want to believe
Yeah.
it.
I just want to hear, I mean, isn't it possible that God created science? I mean.
God did create science, yeah.
That is the
Yes.
mesh of.
Yes, yes, yes. That's exactly right.
I mean, if we
Yes.
talk about where the first cell was.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah.
Well, like God uses math, right? The Fibonacci sequence.
Yes, God created math.
God's finger.
God created physics. God created,
Yeah.
all of it.
It's
Your
just our
God,
way
God
of
is the God of laws.
God is the God of laws, and the universe is guided by laws.
And everything has an order and,
Yes.
and a cause and effect. And
If I throw this up 1,000 times, how many times will it come back down? Why? Because there's a law of gravity. What'd you say?
I was just saying that it's, what did I don't even know what I said. I minute left.
Yes.
Since 4.
The structuring of layers. How about plate tectonics
Platonic.
and subduction zones?
Right.
So all of a sudden, now you've got this set of layers. They go and dive under something else.
Well, that's part of the theory the evolutionists use, but in a lot of cases, there's no possible way that happened. But they still, that is one theory they come up to say why there are layers on top of layers that can't be there. Yes, sir. Okay. See, I had one other point.
Well, like the fossil record. We say, well, these fossils are so many, trillions of years old or billion years old. But we have fossils where, ichthyosaurs are in the middle of giving birth. We have fossils where, fish are in the middle of eating other fish. That doesn't happen over millions of years. That doesn't happen over 100 years. That happens
Almost like a flood.
In 2 minutes, yeah.
A catastrophic burial
Yes.
in mud would be the only thing, or the reasonable thing,
Yes.
that would explain something like that happening. But we have those fossils.
Uh-huh.
So how do you explain that?
Yeah. We have, by the way, this blew my mind too. This made me mad when I found that out when I was doing my research. Do you know how they date the fossils?
Other fossils.
No.
Carbon
They date the fossils according to the rock layer they're in.
Yeah.
You know how they date the rock layer? By the fossils. Does anybody see a problem with this logic? This is called circular reasoning.
Yeah. I think Simon and Garfunkel had it right. A man hears what he wants to hear, disregards the
Amen.
rest.
Amen. But the science behind evolution is non-existent. It's all supposition. I mean, I could not find a single so-called fact of evolution that was not based on a supposition. And many of the evolutionists will admit it. When we come upon a fossil we don't know, we make it up. He actually said that. Because we can't say, we don't know.
Well, and there's the two different sciences, right? You've got observational science. Can you clarify on
Right.
that? Like you've got the science that we do now, that we observe things happening and we compare them to, like say, a control.
Yeah.
But you've got, maybe you can elaborate on
I'm glad you brought that up.
historical science.
Do you
that's
know what?
different.
You all went to school, some of you back when the dinosaurs were alive. My kids thought I went when the dinosaurs were roaming the earth. Where was I going with that? It was brilliant.
Observational.
It was brilliant, yeah.
Science we were taught.
Oh yeah, the scientific method.
Yeah.
You were taught the scientific method somewhere. You may have forgotten it, but you were taught it. What is the scientific method? This is the law for all science in the world.
You form a hypothesis.
You form a hypothesis,
And then you gather evidence.
you gather the evidence, you do the experiment, and then you refigure. In other words, you have to be able to reproduce the evidence.
Right.
If you can't do it, then what?
Keep testing.
You can't claim it. Science will not accept it in the world. If you can't produce the experiment and get the right results, then you can't say it's true. Okay?
Now, what is that, the hypothesis?
It's called the scientific method. You form a hypothesis. In other words, you say, okay, is my hypothesis that if you squeeze this matter with 400 tons of pressure, it'll explode. And then you squeeze it, and if it doesn't explode, then your hypothesis is wrong. You can't apply the scientific method to evolution. Why?
Because it takes millions of years.
Because it takes millions of years.
Nobody can live that long.
So evolution is anti-science. You can't even say it's science. The scientific community would have to define it as non-science. If you can't reproduce it, it's not science. But that didn't bother them. And their whole theory is based on, well, if you give me enough millions and billions of years, I can do anything. It's crazy. I love the explanation of where your eyesight came from. You know where your eyesight came from in evolutionary theory? Because, see, the first critters that came out of evolution, a lightning bolt struck a pool of chemicals and made the first life. And over centuries and millions of years, that became more complicated life, but it was blind. But there happened to be some light-sensitive cells on the outside of that critter. And over more and more and more, hundreds and millions of years, those cells developed into eyes. Do you know what you need to have eyesight? What you have to have? You have to have a lens. You have to have a cornea.
I never knew about that.
You have to have an optic nerve. Even if you had a functioning eyeball, if you didn't have an optic nerve, the optic nerve is what carries the electric signal to your brain, and then your brain has to be able to read that electric signal and turn it into an image.
What is that, specified complexity or something like that?
Yes.
What they call that?
Yes.
Or something like that. I don't know.
How can you explain how eyesight developed by evolution? Why would suddenly an optic nerve develop? Yeah. Even if you could postulate there might be light-sensitive cells on the surface, how does that work into vision? I mean, that's beyond nuts. It's just crazy.
And why light sensitive? Why weren't they dark sensitive?
Well, that's true too. That's true too. All right. The Bible says God created the heavens and the earth, and He made the animals, and they are after their kinds. What does that mean?
A horse is going to produce a horse that will never produce a monkey.
Horses produce horses and don't produce monkeys. Well, what does that do to evolution? Why don't we see weird critters popping up every once in a while today?
Two-headed cow.
Well, now there are,
Oh.
what do you call those?
Anomalies.
That's not the right word, but those things, what?
Mutation.
Mutations. There are mutations, but mutations are almost always destructive. Mutations don't advance the culture, they detract from it. Mutations are bad. Two-headed cows don't live as long as one-headed cows. You know, I saw two-headed snake the other day on the news. Well, that's fine, but it's not going to do well.
Like a
All right.
horse and a mule make a donkey, but a donkey can't then produce a
Exactly,
donkey.
exactly. Well, even then, they're the same species.
Yeah.
But you don't have, you know, dogs producing giraffes or dogs producing snakes. And that's just, that's just not the way it works. And you certainly don't have bears produce, or you don't have whales producing bears. That one just,
They might identify as
yeah, maybe the bears identify as whales. That makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
they.
All right. So God says, from now on, things are going to reproduce after their kind. People are going to produce people. Apples are going to produce apples. Dogs are going to produce dogs. We're not going to have all this other stuff. But see, the evolutionists say, well, if you allow 50 billion years, it might. This is their answer to anything. No matter what evidence you produce, they're going to come up and say, well, you're just not allowing enough time. If you allow enough time, anything can happen. And so God created life on the planets. He created the Garden of Eden. He put the animals and Adam and Eve, and they lived on this earth. Now, the word Adam in Hebrew is Adam. You know what the word means? Dirt. Yeah, Adam means earth man or dirt. God made him from the dirt. And so God took the dirt. Now, everything else he just spoke. Why did he create man with his own hands?
In his image?
Ma'am?
Because he's in his image?
Yes, yes. We're special. We're different than everything else. And so God took the dirt and made us. And we are made in the image of God. And that's the verse 26 in chapter 1. We are made in God's image. Now this is a meaningful statement. What is that? What's the significance of that?
We are like God in some way.
We are like God in some way. Now the angels are not made in the image of God. We are. We have a special relationship with God. Now, God is not a physical being. He's a spirit. So in what way are we like God? We're a spirit. You and I have a spirit, an immortal spirit. Now, I'm still working through this myself. Did God create a new spirit? Did He give us part of His spirit? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a real good question because angels are spirits.
Because angels are spirits. But
So
somehow,
he created some kind of a different spirit.
yeah, somehow we're a different kind of spirit than an angel. Angels were created for what purpose?
Serve him.
To serve God and even to serve us. Scripture actually says angels were created by God to serve us. When was the last time your angel served you?
Maybe today. We don't.
Why can't you call up your angel and have him serve you?
Well, we may not know when they're saved.
You're not in the.
Well, that's true
That's
too.
my point there.
You're not in the spiritual.
The problem is, we lost our position. God put us in the garden. We were perfect. We were absolutely perfect. Adam and Eve walked with God. They were in full relationship with God. What did sin do? It destroyed that relationship. God put us in the garden. He gave us a job. And He gave us a position. How long would Adam and Eve have lived if they hadn't sinned? Forever. But sin brought a horrible curse. Yes.
I always wanted you to bring that up because I wanted you to get your opinion about this. It's always been a complex thing in my mind. When Jesus was resurrected, He reappeared to his disciples. He reappeared in his new body. He could come and go as he wanted to.
Right.
He could be recognized if he
Right.
wanted to.
Right?
He was touched. He still had his
Yeah.
he still had his form.
Yeah.
Is that the same form that Adam was created?
That's a really good question. I have no clue.
That he's the second Adam,
Right?
so he may have been
Now-
whacked to the original body Adam had.
Yeah, that's
In the
true.
garden.
The Bible tells us that you and I are going to get a new body. At the resurrection, we are going to get a new body that is immortal. It's not going to hurt. It's going to be perfect in every way. How much of that did Adam have?
Well, he had an identity.
He had an
He
identity.
walked the
Yeah.
earth.
I personally believe he had an idealized
Yeah.
body. And then when they sinned, they lost it.
That's the reason why Paul said Jesus is second Adam.
I agree. And Jesus, when he resurrected from the dead, was given this perfect body.
And we're back like Adam was
Yes.
before he sinned.
Yes, I believe that. And we will be given back the authority that Adam had. God gave Adam authority to rule the earth. Adam was the king of the earth. If Adam ordered a tiger, you get over here, that tiger had to do what he said.
There's
He
a lot of
ruled.
theology there. I ain't gonna go nowhere.
But didn't God know about sin when he created Adam?
Oh, you're going to get complicated now.
Well, he knew about Satan, so
Yeah, he knew that man was going to be stupid and fail, but he made us anyway.
In other words, omnipotent.
He was omnipotent. He knew it. Why did you have children? Why do we have children? Do we know they're going to be perfect? I mean, mine are, but yours may not. I mean, don't we know our kids are going to fail? Why do we have them?
because God told us to.
Because God goes to, but we love them. Okay, God loved us even though he knew we were going to fail. So what did he do?
He created a way to get out.
He made a provision to get out of it. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. God says, I love man. He's going to fail, but I'm going to give him a way out. And so God gave Adam and Eve rulership of the earth. And God's ideal, God's design, was that humanity would rule the earth as God rules in heaven. The Bible says that. Adam and Eve were supposed to rule the earth as God ruled in heaven. And he gave Adam and Eve the kingdom. The words there, when he says, have dominion over the earth, those are kingdom words. Adam and Eve were royalty. You and I should have been royalty. But sin broke it. We threw away the kingdom and brought a horrible curse on all of creation. Creation would have lasted forever. But when we sinned, we brought a curse of destruction upon the entire universe. And eventually, what's going to happen to the entire cosmos? It's going to burn. All of it's going to go. Because of sin. Sin brought that horrible curse. Eventually, the sun is going to burn up. And they'll have to finish I-35 in the dark. They've been working on it for 100 years.
Finish after it.
Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait till next week to see where this goes.